Today, we're going to be talking with Aaron Breimer from Veritas Farm Management, and he is the Veritas lead. And we're going to be talking about variable rate seeding and what to expect, and there's a lot of chatter with that going on in the industry lately. So Veritas has 6 years, they're going into their 6th year of doing variable rate seeding scripts. So Aaron's got, and his company have very good experience with this. So thought we'd ask him some questions and really get kind of down to the nuts and bolts of things. So I guess first question, Aaron, is why would a grower look at doing variable rate seeding?
So variable rate seeding, the idea came from the idea that if a farmer has two types of soil, so maybe a heavier clay type farm and a sandier type farm, he's going to treat them differently. And basically what variable rate seeding does is takes the idea of treating two fields differently into treating different parts of the field differently. So farmers will have some variation across every field.
Yeah.
How significant that variation is, well, that depends on the area you're in. But there is variation in every field, and variable rate planting allows you to take advantage of that.
So really we're looking at creating a field within a field, if you will.
And that's exactly the way to look at it. So maybe even 2 or 3 fields within that one field, depending on how much variation you have in there.
What would be needed to go to a variable rate seeding type program on your farm, from management to data, equipment, that sort of stuff?
So the first step is when you're ready to start writing scripts, is to make sure you have the equipment that will allow you to plant. With a planter, what that means is either a hydraulic drive or an electric drive, either across the entire planter or on individual row units. It's completely up to what the grower's preference is, and then making sure that they have the monitor and the controller that ties into the GPS. Most tractors with the auto steer have that equipment, so that's not too big of a problem. Probably the biggest challenge that growers face is how to create those fields within the fields. The industry refers to this as management zones. So the term management zone can be a little intimidating to growers.
Right.
Basically what that is saying, okay, what part of that field is different than the others? The absolute simplest way for a farmer to create a management zone is just to draw a line and say, okay, the west half of my farm is sandy, and the east half, maybe it's a little heavier, or not as many tile drains. And I want to treat those as different based on seeding rates. That's the simplest way. From there, you start getting into more complex ways to be able to create management zones. There's a lot of interest on satellite imagery, on aerial drone work, yield maps, elevation data. Most GPS programs, when you do your yield monitoring or your planting data, will generate a elevation map to go along with it. So elevation is a great way, and growers will say, okay, my higher spots in my field, those are my eroded knolls, I want to treat those differently, or maybe that's where my sand ridge is. Is there any one right way? Probably not. In my opinion, and our experience would suggest the farmer's experience is probably the most important. We refer to that as the data layer between the farmer's ears. That is pretty important. If they don't have input into how that management zone is going to be created, it's hard for them to buy into the concept.
For sure. So I know from the seed side of things, we're doing a lot of work with regards to figuring out the variable responses to the seed varieties within, higher range, low range, medium type yield, low yield types, and high yield types. So a lot of that's coming forward. That's really come to the industry as we move forward. You guys have been working really with creating those management zones, which is really the hardest part of that whole process that I see. The equipment, a lot of equipment's likely being bought new has the ability to have that done. And from what I understand, to equip older equipment, really, if you have the monitor, isn't that much extra cost to get into it?
Exactly. There are a lot of companies out on the marketplace that will give you the ability to retrofit your planters. Retrofitting on variable rate planting and variable rate fertilizer. If you can think of a way that you want to variable rate a product, there's a company out there that can do it for you and can make it easy for you to implement.
You mentioned fertilizer and variable rating fertilizer, so I'm guessing within those zones we've created with good yield data and soil type data and elevation and that, we're going to increase population or decrease population, that's probably going to lead us to change some other practices like fertility and different things like that. So what are you seeing we need to work with there, other practices wise?
So when we talk about variable rate planting, we're working on part of a concept called prescription farming. So coming up with a prescription that's going to change for each management zone. And the concept behind prescription farming is understanding your limiting factor. If you've got a low producing area and it is extremely low in phosphate, then perhaps adjusting your phosphate is going to allow you to have a positive impact. And maybe it's not variable rate planting that's the limiting part that you need to be focusing on. Now that said, maybe you don't have the ability to do variable rate phosphate or to be able to have it affected in a quick enough manner. Okay, then maybe it is planting that is going to be the issue. The more data layers that you have, the more information, the better recommendations and the better decisions that can be made for the farmer.
And I think that's definitely something that we've had to really look at. It's not just I have yield maps and I have soil test data. We really need to look at all factors. And as we move forward, like you said, drones you mentioned earlier, we're getting the ability to create a lot more layers to learn a lot more. And like you said, I appreciate what you say with that layer between the farmer's ears, because we could look at a field not knowing the field, and it could be drainage that's the issue in that spot, and maybe he's tiled. And so maybe spending the money on tile first is the way to look, and it's really a long-term process to getting there. So we've got those other practices. We're increasing population and fertility. Likely we're going to need to do some fungicide with that, and maybe some other management practices, split applying nitrogen, increasing our nitrogen, those sorts of things as well, on corn especially, obviously. With beans-wise, you guys do have experience, but we'll concentrate on corn right now.
When we write our prescriptions, we encourage the grower to bring in their seed partners. And that's the seed dealers, that's the agronomists from the seed companies. They know the varieties better than we ever will. They will be able to tell us if that variety is sensitive to disease or if it is more responsive to a high management system. By having that person as part of the process and developing the recommendation, the management zones, the actual prescription that goes into the management zone, you can make better decisions. There's no doubt if you have a variety that's sensitive to disease and you push the population and you make it a very healthy, rich environment with more nitrogen, you're probably going to have more disease and you're going to have to manage it accordingly. Now, if you do not use fungicide as a regular part of your program, that's an important decision to be made in when you're doing the variable rate prescriptions. It doesn't mean that variable rate's not for you. It's just how do you take advantage of variable rate for your operation. It has to be completely customized to fit the farmer's needs.
You know, something that's burning in the back of everybody's mind is what kind of payback are we going to see to variable rate seeding on corn? And you guys have done some excellent work with variable rate seeding soybeans too. So what kind of payback are you guys seeing over the years?
It's been part of the challenge. When we first started, we used this approach that most farmers are familiar with. And it was actually an approach that was used on variable rate planting back in the 1990s when it was first being evaluated. And that's just a simple side-by-side check strip. The problem is, with variable rate, you are trying to take advantage of that variation. It's no longer a case that you're going to have that perfectly flat field where nothing's changing. So because of that, every strip is slightly different. So one of the challenges has been trying to figure out how to actually measure that. There's been a lot of work going into the math and the statistics behind it to be able to evaluate it. We think we've got a pretty good system. There is a lot of interest within the industry on what we're doing, as well as what other people within the industry are doing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the industry can develop to be able to do a better job on measuring. That said, the system that we've been using, we've been seeing a net positive increase on corn between 5 and 9 bushels per acre as an average over those 6 years. On a drier year with corn, you're going to see a bigger response, especially if it's droughty type soil. In soybeans, we've been seeing closer to that 3 to 6 bushel increase. Now, when you do the economics, with soybeans do pay a lot better. The net return on variable rate planted soybeans is probably better than variable rate corn. That said, that doesn't mean that's going to stay that way as the seed companies figure out how to push their corn varieties into the higher populations to truly take advantage of the variable rate planting.
And one of the last questions that I was thinking of asking you is how hard is this to implement, and which is really going to summarize all of the things that you've gone over, which is having the equipment first, having the data that's good data to work with, not just data. And I guess we should clarify, not all data is good data. So we're really looking at a base. We're starting at data and equipment, I guess, is where we'd start. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say even if a farmer does not have a variable rate planter today, it would be very wise to make sure that they are collecting good yield data, because that's going to be part of the process. Like I said, you do not need yield data to be able to create a management zone. The information that the farmer has, he'll be able to tell you what parts of his field are going to be a higher yielding or lower yielding area. Once the management zones have been created, the grower has the equipment, it actually becomes a very easy at planting time to simply push the button and drive on. It's no different than planting how he's always planted, and the planter and the monitor work together seamlessly. Probably the challenge that a lot of growers have is around writing the actual prescription and marrying it up to those management zones, or creating the management zones. Some farmers are very comfortable around computers, around the technology, around the software, and they're able to generate it all on their own. And it's a hands-off approach for them. Hey, that's great for them. For the majority of our customers, they don't feel comfortable in front of a computer. So we help them by writing the script in a consultative approach. So that way they can say, yep, that's my field. Yep, that makes sense. I've talked to my seed partner. Yeah, that's going to work for me. And then we take the process to make sure that that script is written in the right, for lack of a better term, language, and plugged into the monitor with a little bit of training for the grower. So that way when the dust starts to fly, that everything works right. Because if it doesn't work right, the grower's going to turn off that prescription and drive on just like he normally would, and there's no benefit to anyone if that's the case.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time, Aaron, and we definitely have a lot to look forward to with variable rate seeding as we move forward in the future, with new layers becoming available. At Pride Seeds, we're working with our precision ag division called Advantage Acre, where we're working heavily towards getting those varieties sorted out and being better for the management zones and which varieties to use in which management zones. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to working together across the industry to see variable rate seeding work better for all the farmers, because we want that to be a seamless, easy transition for all of them. Thank you very much. It's been Dan Foster, Pride Seeds Market Development Agronomist, coming to you today with Aaron Breimer from Veritas Farm Management.